pretty awesome.
We got one more coach coming. Here, I want to send next Bert. I don't really look good, right? Okay, don't, yeah. Oh, this is gonna be rough. I can't really move the podium. Okay, if you can't see my camera right there, I can't see you. Ready? 1, 2, 3. We're gonna do it again. 1, 2, 3.
Yeah. Okay, this has never been done in the council chamber before, but we're all going to give you, everybody in this room is going to give you a standing ovation. Well done. We are so proud of you, and we're proud that you represent Springville. And I think one of the coaches put it best is that we're grateful for the kind of people that you are. That's the most important. I remember a comment that Coach Everett made last year, when she said apparently somebody sprained their ankle or something, and they said, my ankle hurts. And Coach Everett looked down and says, yeah, get up, let's play. And and it's that stick-to-itiveness that I think all of us need to capsulize in our life, and that is just get the job done. And we appreciate everything that you've done, and what great examples you are to the younger generation, that you can be good people and that you can accomplish good things and that you can do things that you're proud of. This is what makes the city great and our country great. So thank you very much for everything. Thanks.
Now's the part where you say, I've got to go home and do homework. I'm not going to be able to stay for the whole meeting.
And you've earned the right that if you want to come sit up on the stand with us, you can do that too.
Yes, I love
Yeah.
that female energy.
All right, we have two people that would like to give public comment. We'll wait.
Somebody has left their keys under a chair here.
Come back in.
I'm like, we need a little more. Love you guys.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, we see him running around all the time. It's cross country. It's great. Okay, there's a lot to be had with our meeting, but that's the best part of the meeting right there that's going out the door. So thank you.
Yeah.
All right, we have Robert Burke, who would like to speak to us in regard to secondary water in Hunters Valley. We'll give you 3 to 4 minutes, if that would be okay.
That's plenty.
Did number 2 not show up? The recognition?
We're going to do that in just a minute.
We appreciate the opportunity to address the mayor and the esteemed council. I'm here with Representative Gene Metler and myself, Robert Burke. We represent several of our neighbors who are original purchasers of residential lots of land developed by longtime Springville family of birds under the corporate name of C&A Construction. The lots are along and adjacent to the River Bottom Road in the Hunters Valley neighborhood. We have owned these lots that we built our homes on for nearly 19 years. And they were developed with city water, sanitary sewer, fire hydrants, streets, curb and gutter, street lighting, sidewalks, land for a park, and land set aside for Latter-day Saint Chapel, and water lines for secondary water that is non-treated or considered non-culinary. And it's used for landscape irrigation, which maintains our property values, benefiting the city and county revenues by virtue of property taxes. The selling price of our lots were obviously inclusive of all these improvements, which also formed a basis for property tax appraisal values. These values have been continually assessed year after year in our taxes, and yet the city of Springville has never provided water to those secondary water lines. Our concern and our quest is to find specific answers to our questions. And I've got a paper here that I can leave with you here. Question number 1 and question number 2. Question number 1 is, why has the city of Springville failed to provide water to the neighborhood secondary water lines to the residents, so the residents do not have to use culinary water for irrigation purposes? And just within the last 5 years, major construction projects have built the Bartholomew Park Lake and various water lines through the streets of our neighborhood, routing water to the Walmart area to provide irrigation water to the west side of the city. Our neighborhood already had the water lines and was bypassed. Why was that? And if the city's answer for us is going to be that it was cost prohibitive, then why was it not also cost prohibitive for the west side? We were first, we were ready, and we were waiting for the previous 15 years. Question number 2, if it is now the decision of the city of Springville to never provide water in our secondary water lines, can we be compensated in some manner for our loss by an agreed upon resolution? And the impetus for our concern is that for several years, we and our neighbors have been talking about this, wondering if it's ever going to happen. And with the impending water shortages that we see in the future for our state because of rapid growth, the natural thought is that most governing entities across the country simply raise the rates on water. And we're thinking that that just kind of adds salt to the wound to have to start paying higher water rates when we face those shortages. And when we've already paid for our secondary water lines, we're paying property taxes that reflect the value of our property. And the prospect for paying even more for impending water shortages, as I said, just kind of adds salt to the wound. So I'll just leave this paper here with your recorder, and we're not anxious, or we're not. I guess we are kind of anxious, but we don't have any deadline for this answer. We think the time has come that we should be able to get a good answer from the city on why this has happened.
Okay, thank you very much. And yes, please just leave that with,
We'll get a response through Public Works.
okay, that'd be great. Yes,
You're welcome to sit if you'd like.
yeah,
You can stay there.
yeah.
I'd like to address the council. Appreciate the time.
Do you want to state your name and your address, please?
Eugene Mettler. I live at 1248 South, 2200 East, right next to the Hobble Creek Park. Do you understand, as a council, that millions of gallons of culinary water is being used on our city parks? The apartments adjacent to my house, Hobble Creek Park, I would suspect that there are hundreds of thousands of gallons used each summer to water that park. And that's another reason why secondary water should be brought down to that area, because it would very easily supply the need of the park. Like Mr. Burke said, we're in a situation where water is going to be premium. I would really like to see the city move forward with secondary water in our area. Thank you.
Thank you. And we'll get the address, and you can get the answers from Mr. Burke, and we'll address the response to him. Thank you. Okay, Clark King on the CRC.
Councilman Miller, you're probably very fortunate that you don't know me. The rest of these people,
I know you. You brought the picture of the fire truck.
yeah. I don't know very much, but one thing I do know is about the Clyde Rec Center. I guess you know it's celebrating 4 years of being open this week. And I've been going there almost 4 years every day that it's been open. And I can speak very, very highly of those people in charge of that building that run it. And even more importantly than that, those young but fantastic lifeguards that watch those people who are swimming. In fact, two of the young ladies that were here tonight are lifeguards down at the rec center. I know it's probably not budget time to give raises to city employees, but if you could find it in your budget, a few dollars to give those fine people down at the rec center a bonus, it'd be greatly appreciated by people like me that go down there and interact with those fine people. Thank you for your time, and that is a great establishment, and it's got a great name. I know that there was financial considerations in the naming of that building, but that company has helped a lot of people in this city for a lot of years. And that's got a great name and a great heritage to it. And I can speak highly of those people. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Clark.
Okay, thank you, Clark. Great. We'd like to recognize some people for their service on the Springville Arts Commission. Who's going to do that? You just want to go through
It
that?
should be Rita. It's going to be postponed.
Yeah, if we could continue though, that'd
Yes,
be nice.
that'd be great. Is that okay, Kim? Okay, great. Okay, we have the consent agenda. Any questions on the consent agenda?
We have visitors here. You know that. Some back rows visitors.
I should have asked this. Let me back up just a minute. If we have any visitors or school people who are here or scouts, we recognize you and appreciate you being here. Thank you very much.
It's a good night to come.
Yes, thanks, Craig. It's a great night to come. You got some swag. How's that? And you didn't even have to play basketball or run a mile.
I know there's some people like watching it online, but you guys came down, so good on you, right?
Yeah, thank you. I apologize for not recognizing you and appreciate you being here tonight. Thank you. Okay, any questions on the consent agenda? Okay, I'll entertain a motion for approval.
I'll make a motion to approve the consent agenda as written.
I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. That's a roll call vote. Liz?
Yes.
Chris?
Yes.
Mike?
Yes.
Jason?
Yes.
Craig?
Yep.
Great. Okay, we have on our regular agenda, we have a resolution for a property adjustment for the Jacobson property. John?
Yes, thank you, Mayor and council members. This item is on the agenda and it's dealing with Mr. John Jacobson's property. Mr. Jacobson came into my office a few weeks ago, and he lives here at 561. And the reason why he wanted to come talk to me is you can kind of see what his boundary line's doing there in front of his house. This street's kind of an interesting street. The street is one street north of the old Grant School. The old Grant School's down in this area. Just to kind of give you a location, then you got 4th east over here. And I don't know how this was developed, this street. But you can kind of see you have two different alignments on both sides of the street and a few things like that. But really what he came in for is he's trying to clean up the boundary lines on his property, and you can see he owns past the back of walk into the sidewalk, and then the city currently shows that they own part of his driveway. He has been taking care of this, or his family, for many decades, and so he just wants to come in and basically clean up his property line so it looks like the other properties. So basically what would happen is the line would become back a sidewalk. Mr. Jacobson would deed the blue part that you see here on the screen to the city. The city then would deed the red part to Mr. Jacobson. The blue part's roughly 170 to 175 square feet. The red part's about 200. So there would be a little bit more from the city going his direction. But again, it's something that he's been taking care of, or his family, for decades. So the recommendation is to move forward with allowing the mayor to sign quitclaim deeds and any other necessary documents to clean up this property line.
Does there need to be an adjustment along the length of the driveway too, where it just shows the gap?
No, that's really that's something he's already cleaned up, and it's really between the two property owners.
So is there a reason why this doesn't go on consent agenda? This type of stuff? Is it because it's a resolution, or why?
It could have gone on consent agenda.
Just curious.
Next time it will, it sounds like.
Well, I just
I will make a motion
Thank you.
to approve resolution 2022-16, authorizing the mayor to execute the necessary documents to adjust the boundary line between the right-of-way and the property at 561 East Aaron Avenue to the back of the sidewalk.
Great.
I'll second it.
I have a motion and a second. A roll call vote. Mike?
Yes.
Chris?
Yes.
Craig?
yes.
Liz?
Yes.
Jason?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Okay, Brandon Graham will make a presentation in relationship to power line cell.
Yes. Okay, Mayor and Council, I'm going to talk to you a little bit tonight about the Spanish Fork power line purchase. Utah Code 10-2-421. There's 4 pages of that. It's John's favorite language. But I'm just going to summarize that in 2 pages, or 2 quick little slides. It states electric utility service in annexed areas. It talks about reimbursement for value of facilities, liability, and arbitration. And it was amended in 2021 of the general session. The code summary states the receiving party, which in this case will be Spanish Fork, shall write a letter of intent to the transferring party, which is Springville City Power. It also states, unless otherwise agreed by the parties, the reimbursement for the transfer of each facility shall include, number 1, the cost of preparing the inventory, number 2, the value of each transferred facility calculated by the current depreciation or the current replacement costs of the facility, less depreciation based on the facility's age, and the cost incurred by physical separation of each facility. If the age of the facility may be readily determined by the transferring party shall use that age to determine the facility's depreciation. If the parties cannot agree on the facility to be transferred or the respective reimbursement amount, the parties shall proceed with the facility transferred and the reimbursement based on the inventory submitted by the transferring party, and the parties shall equally share in the costs of the mediation or arbitration. So this picture really don't give this line, or you got to really look at it, but if you look at the sides of it, you can tell it's all shell rotted and it's a big crack in it, and there's 21 spans on this line. Only 7 spans are newer. The rest was built in 1971.
What's the location of this?
So it's west of 2600 west, which would be Spanish Fork's Main Street, along the S-turn in Spanish Fork, and it feeds the Rocky Mountain Vet Clinic. So it goes out there in the new annexed area that Spanish Fork annexed into their city. Used to be county. And so this line was built in 1971. It's not up to our standards, so it would have to be rebuilt. So Springville energized 7 spans of the line feeding the Rocky Mountain Vet Clinic in around April of 1999. Spanish Fork agreed to pay the depreciation value for the entire line based on these 7 spans of the newer line. The line is in the county right of way, so there is no easement involved. And there will be at least 3 more of these buyouts in the near future associated with 1600 South UDOT project. Does the council want to see a presentation on all of them?
You guys are businessmen, right?
Well, didn't you give us a list of?
It'll come to you on
It
the
will
consent
come
agenda.
to you.
Yeah,
So
it'll-
you'll get a
it'll show the
report, and if
list.
you have questions, you can ask, but do you want?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay. Do you have any questions for me?
I just have a question. We're right now providing the energy, the power in those lines. How do they, where will they, they're gonna take over the energy and they'll be providing it with, are they Spanish Fork or Rocky Mountain power?
So,
I don't quite understand if,
okay, so I kind of addressed this in my staff report, but there's 4 meters out there, 3 residential meters and 1 commercial meter. The commercial meter being the large animal vet clinic. And with the new development that's going out there, the development has allowed them to build a power line all the way out there, and they are going to heat them 3 meters up that way.
Okay.
Spanish Fork.
Spanish
Spanish
Fork
Fork
City
power.
will, yes. Yep.
Other questions? Okay, thank you. I'll entertain a motion for approval.
I'll motion that.
Okay.
A motion to approve resolution, no, I think that's the wrong one. 2022-16, authorizing the mayor to execute the necessary documents. No, no,
It's on the,
it's 2020, okay, a motion to approve resolution.
No, it's not a resolution. It's
I'm
a
so
motion
sorry.
under item number 10.
Okay, a motion to approve selling 21 spans of single-phase power line to Spanish Fork City that has been annexed into their city limits boundary for the amount of $49,304.92.
I think I said resolution. I got you had the wrong way, Liz. Okay, I have a motion.
I'll second it.
Okay, call for a vote. Those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? Thank you. Appreciate you being here.
Thanks, Brandon.
Were we nice? Were we okay? Yeah, great. Okay. Okay, we have a, John, would you like to, Mr. Penrod, would you like to take a moment and talk about the annexation of Santana?
Yes, thank you, Mayor and council members. This item comes before the council on the city's petition. So currently the city owns all the property you see here that's in blue. It's the old Santana Raceway property. There's approximately 55 acres within that blue marked property. This tonight is again the city's petition. The way that this works is that the city has already provided intent to itself and to the county that it wants to annex this property. This property is in the city's annexation declaration. The county has already sent out notice to everybody within 300 feet of this property to let them know that the city's in the process of annexing the property. They've also sent out notice to affected entities, and so that would include entities such as, or we have, such as Spanish Fork and others that might have some kind of government interest within the area. Right now, this is before you. If you accept the annexation, then what will happen from here is it'll go to the county and give the county the opportunity to finally accept the petition as well. And then it will come back to the city council for a public hearing to finalize the annexation. So there's still a few more steps. The county has 30 days after, if the council tonight decides to accept this, for them to take action to either accept or deny or show us something we might be missing if we are missing something on this annexation. But we expect it to go through smoothly, and so we'll probably be back in about 30 to 45 days for a public hearing.
I probably should have asked this earlier, but how come we didn't straighten it out and go back down and follow that other property line? Because isn't the plan to grab that as well on the other side of the track?
It is not. That is actually in Spanish Fork's annexation declaration, and I don't know why it's sensed that way, other than you have the railroad here, and so that might be the reason why they decided to do it.
We had talked about that once before.
We have talked about it. The property owners actually have asked or are interested in the property coming to Springville. In fact, we had the person kind of jump up in one of our public hearings over here asking about that. Yeah, the primary limiter there is Springville City has no access across the track and no way to get there, and therefore kind of access goes through Spanish Fork. So it's not impossible, but it isn't hard, if not impossible, for us to serve that area to do it. So we've told the property owners multiple times, the actual owners and those that have it under contract, that we could possibly consider that, but you're either going to have to get Spanish Fork to adjust boundary lines to allow us to gain ground access there, or figure out a way across the tracks, and thus far they haven't come forward with
So we'll
solutions.
just wait and fix that, because it will be fixed, but we'll
Yeah.
just do it when access is granted.
Interestingly, though, that's also similar to the discussion we're having on the west side of town, north of 4th North. That's in Springville's annexation declaration boundary, but not in Spanish Fork's. So Spanish Fork is kind of saying, hey, let's wait to see what Springville does. We've, at the staff level, said, hey, that's in Spanish Fork's annexation boundary. If they want to change their mind, that's okay. That doesn't
Or
present.
south, or south.
Forth South, yeah.
South, right?
Oh, sorry, well, it's 4th North too, but yes, north of 4th South.
Yeah, we had that conversation
Right.
a few weeks ago as well. Okay. Cool. Well, I was just thinking, well, it would be nice to grab two birds with one stone, but because of the road, you can't.
Yeah.
So I get it.
And there also is the issue with, right now, would have to change some annexation declarations. That's the first step.
Because of
Yeah.
But I'm sure that'll get fixed eventually. So cool. Thanks.
Other questions? Okay, I'm open for a motion.
Make a motion to approve resolution 2022-17 and accept the annexation petition for further study regarding the Santana property.
A second.
Okay, it's a roll call vote. Chris?
Yes.
Mike?
Yes.
Craig?
Yes.
Liz?
Yes.
Jason?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Okay, this is the most exciting part of the meeting right now. Bruce and I did a podcast today, and it was the only time that I started giggling through the whole thing twice. We had to do 3 takes on it. I don't know. It's just it's Bruce's demeanor. It's just amazing.
I'm not sure how I'm supposed to take that.
In a public forum, I'm not sure either. So
Thank you, Mayor. We've gone through now the MBA and RDA adopting tentative budgets. We need to do the same for the city's budget for the upcoming fiscal year. I've got a presentation here. I'll go through it as quickly as you want me to go through it. I know this is often one of the more challenging presentations because most of this information you've heard now for 2 or 3 times, including for about 6 hours in our last budget meeting just a few weeks ago. There's not a lot of new information here, but I do want to go through the presentation for the benefit of those who may be joining us online as well as for the public record. So you'll just bear with me. I'll go through it as succinctly and quickly as possible. I did just return from Government Finance Officers Association conference, which is only slightly more fun than tonight's festivities here on the budget. But Phil Dean, who's the chief economist for the U of U Kim C. Gardner Policy Institute, made a good presentation on the economy and sort of corroborated a number of the reports that we've heard in advance of preparing the budget as it relates particularly to Utah's economy. You can see on your slide here 5 observations that he sort of left in summary in terms of continued disruptions in supply chains, the fact that we've had massive infusions into the economy from federal stimulus dollars, and we're now seeing accelerating inflation, which is having a significant impact on wages as well as project costs that we're seeing here in the city. He notes and has a nice economic chart for this, with wages being below the equilibrium point. We're going to continue to see labor shortages and a tight labor market until wages increase to balance out that equilibrium. Having said that, he reiterated what we've heard from a number of economists now, that Utah sort of resides in a very unique bubble, and in large measure our insulated from a lot of the economic challenges that many in the rest of the country are seeing. It's a little bit represented in this chart here. This represents Utah's diversity in its economy. The darker the red, the better or more diverse the economy is. This is on a scale called the Hackman Index, with 100 being the highest score. Utah's at 95.5, with only a handful of other states in the country at comparable or slightly higher levels. So that's good news for Utah, having a diverse economy. I think I've shared this slide with you before in one of our previous strategy meetings, but this is a graphic representation of the amount of federal dollars infused into the economy, which is quite staggering. This is dollars as a percent of the nation's GDP. And the top bar there was during the dot-com bust of 2001, where there were some bailouts that occurred, but that was only 0.4% of GDP. During the Great Recession in kind of the 2008-2009 timeframe, got up to 1.3% of GDP. But through the pandemic in 2020 and 2021, with now 3 separate waves of federal stimulus and bailout money coming, we're approaching 25% of GDP, which is pretty staggering when you think about the number of dollars that represents. And we've seen it here in Springville as CARES Act money and ARPA money continues to flow into the city for our use in response to the pandemic. And this is really moving the needle on the economy in terms of the amount of dollars available to be spent, and it's creating problems in supply chains and also contributing to inflation. Just a couple of quick briefs, and I'm just going to start accelerating here through this so we don't spend the entire time talking about the economy. But do want you to be aware of the fact that we are sensitive to a very tight labor market and are trying to address that. The council's been very responsive in terms of increasing wages actually back into last year, and then proposing to continue that through this next year at a slightly reduced level. 2 separate slides. If you look down in the takeaway under number 2, Phil's advice to elected officials was, or actually his advice to me, is to help you as elected officials understand that the dramatic sales increases are partially illusory and need to be reserved for increased costs. And he repeats that statement in a future slide. Really just a word of warning as we budget through an inflationary phase to be cautious about increased revenues that we see coming in, but the fact that they're going to be largely gobbled up in higher wage costs, higher materials costs for projects, etc. And this is just a quick representation of inflation that we're facing and really dealing with. Some of the presentations I saw early in the year really hinted at the fact that we were coming close to peaking on the inflation rate and that things would start to settle down mid-year and into the end of the year. So far, the line is still going straight up. We're not quite to the level of the 1970s and 80s, but the highest since then. I'll skip over this one. It's basically the same slide that I just gave you. To move into the tentative budget proper, on the revenue side in the general fund, and I'll sort of talk general fund first, then we'll hit the enterprise funds here at the end, and then we'll wrap up. We're approaching $36 million in the general fund, which is pretty staggering. When I started here, I think the general fund budget was about $21, $22 million. So we've really grown in terms of how much it costs to run the government over the last 12 years. I think it was noted in Administrator Fitzgerald's executive summary of the budget that there are some one-time dollars coming into here. For example, we've got nearly $2 million in ARPA funding coming in, so those are going to be non-recurring revenues over the coming years. So in terms of real growth, growth in the size of the city, property tax receipts, sales tax receipts, the growth over last year is about 7%. We are still anticipating significant new development in the city with about 500 new dwelling units or equivalent dwelling units budgeted. Transfers from our enterprise funds are an important part of the general fund budget with nearly $6 million budgeted there, and I'll talk about that in a little more detail here in a couple slides. And then we do have $475,000 in fund balance programmed, kind of in two categories, drawing into some C Road Fund reserves to fund some of the projects that were anticipated for this year, along with a couple of operating studies that aren't going to be completed in the current year that we need to carry over and take care of next year. To hit on the wage point that I made earlier, we are proposing in the budget here a 3% merit increase. And again, that comes on the heels of historic increases from last year that I think keeps us competitive in the market. We will be doing some additional market analysis, and there may be some adjustments to the grade table where that's warranted. We were very fortunate this year, however, as it relates to benefits, that we were able to see really no increase in the cost of our health insurance premiums, which made it much easier to balance the budget. We've had a number of years where we've had double-digit % increases on benefits. It's a couple of line item highlights in the general fund. Most of these revolve around personnel or new positions that have been proposed in the departments, primarily to match growth that's occurring in the city. Very few programmatic changes. These are mostly capacity issues for departments in the city. So in administration, adding a part-time employee for office assistants. In the cemetery, we were able to find a grant that's going to fund some part-time hours for a project there. Adding 300 hours in the court to accommodate their workload. Police dispatch center has been very tight, and this is a change from what you saw in the earlier tentative budget, where we've now, after some personnel changes there over the last few weeks, are now proposing to convert one of the part-time positions to a full-time position, and then supplement that with some additional part-time hours to accommodate coverage in the dispatch.
Hey, Bruce,
center.
on that one, just for clarity, it's 300 part-time hours, and they're actually on the part-time to full-time as a reduction of 2080.
Right.
So it's, yeah, oh, so you're total, well, I'm just trying to do the math there, but.
Maybe I wrote the 1,000 wrong.
Yeah.
The part-time to full-time would have reduced part-time hours into full-time hours, same number of hours.
Correct. And then we did add 300 hours for the necessary training.
Okay. I might have
Yeah, I think
transposed
that just,
that from
1,000 should be a 300, and then I think
Okay.
we're correct.
Facilities, we added a part-time position there, primarily dedicated to the CRC, just to help cover maintenance requirements there. The facility's open. Stacy, you'll have to help me. 5 a.m. to 10 p.m. And we've got someone there for 8 hours of that time. But believe it or not, there are maintenance issues many of the hours that they're open. So this is an attempt to help cover a little more of that time. We've added 260 hours in our victim advocate position. This is largely grant funded, and then added another part-time position, office assistant position in the legal department, a part-time lead assistant librarian in the library, and then convert a previously contracted position to an in-house position, really just changing the dollars over, but bringing the function of, this is sort of a graphic design position, bring that in-house. And then adding some hours in the museum for both lead and regular rental hosts. That's really being driven by the amount of rentals that they're doing and the number of events that are being hosted there at the museum, but an additional part-time position in outreach educator funded by the POPS grant from the state. In the police department, we are proposing, and this is really growth-driven, one new full-time police officer, and then part-time position as an office assistant there. In the Treasury, we're proposing to convert a part-time customer service clerk and reduce part-time hours, but convert that position to a full-time position. And then I think most of you have probably heard the announcement that we've made a structural change As one of our directors recently left us for another job, we've kind of examined that and are proposing to combine the former Parks and Buildings and Grounds Department with the Recreation Department to have one department, Parks and Recreation, and we'll convert that director position over to an assistant director position with 3 superintendents kind of leading up the major areas there within that department. This really doesn't have much budget impact, but the structural component of it we're changing in the budget. And finally, in 2 of our enterprise funds, wastewater adding 260 hours to the office assistant position, and in the water department adding 1 full-time water supervisor position. I'm not going to go through every one of these lines. I could just kind of hit the highlights here, but in terms of general capital projects, we've got $7.7 million budgeted there. Some big drivers are really grant-funded projects. So there's about $1 million in our flood protection program that's budgeted. A MAG project that's a little under $1 million, well, it's $600,000, and then you can see $4.8 million in new road construction and existing road maintenance projects. MAG dollars are funding big chunks of that, and the remainder of that would be C road revenue that's restricted for those purposes.
Bruce, where's the Hobble Creek Mapleton lateral trailhead? Is that the right of the mouth of the canyon?
Yes, just that area
Yeah.
right above Bartholomew.
Okay, thanks.
Moving out of the general CIP fund into the impact or the special revenue fund, this is where our impact fee projects reside. We've got a little over $1 million proposed for street impact fee projects, $250,000 for public safety. That's really land acquisition for a future fire substation on the west side of town, and then $564,000 for parks and trail-related projects that are being funded by impact fees. Moving over to our vehicle and equipment fund, we've got scheduled replacements there totaling just short of $2.8 million. We've got $287,000 program for facility renewal and replacement. And then just to mention the PAR tax, we have started collecting that money now as it went effective April 1st. We've not programmed any of those dollars in next year's budget, pending input from the newly formed PAR committee. We can amend the budget partway through the year if you choose to do that, or wait until next year and program those dollars in arrear, which it sounds like that's more the plan. Circling back to general fund transfers, and I bring this up and highlight it just from the standpoint that the state does have some significant requirements on the city in terms of transparency related to transfers. So we need to identify what we call administrative fees. So these would be overhead charges to enterprise funds for services that they receive from the general fund. So to the extent that the water, power, sewer funds benefit from the legal department, the HR department, the finance department, treasury, we have a methodology there to assign those overhead costs, and those dollars are represented here. That's $3 million total for all the enterprise funds combined. Then there are operating transfers, which are different. So these would be transfers that come from the enterprise funds to the general fund. There's no consideration in terms of a service received in kind from the enterprise funds. There's no expectation for repayment of these dollars, so they can be used for any general governmental purpose. Those total about $3.1 million. And then we also have utilities that are provided by those separate funds, and those are effectively donated by the utilities. We do make a good faith effort, in some cases to meter, but mostly estimations on what the value of those contributed utilities are. So you can see a total between all 3 of those approaching $7 million. So it's a significant part of what funds the general fund. And as we go into our June 21st meeting, you'll be required to hold a public hearing related to these transfers. We've sent notice in the utility bills and have advertised on our media outlets that these transfers are occurring, so that your utility users in the city are aware that those transfers are being made from their fee revenue to the general fund for general government purposes.
So sorry, excuse me, Bruce.
Yes.
So you said that the operating transfer there, that's just random, how you decide what you decide to transfer over?
It's not random.
Not
It's,
random,
it's been set by policy by the council, and I should have mentioned that. Actually, I think I do in a later slide there. The policy direction that we've taken thus far is 5% of the gross retail sales. So 5% of water sales, 5% of power sales. So that percentage amount has not changed from, I think it's been 5% since I've been here.
Okay.
So for the last 12 years anyway. That number is held steady. So the dollars fluctuate obviously as the sales increase, but the rate of transfer, the percentage charged is the same.
Okay, thanks.
I think just one, maybe two slides in the enterprise fund, and then we're done. The big story in the enterprise funds, and when I say enterprise funds, I really mean those departments of the city that operate like businesses. So they collect fees in exchange for the services that they provide, primarily their utilities, but the golf course is also considered to be an enterprise fund. And the big story here is just rate increases. And this is consistent with a longstanding policy we've had as a city to try to match inflation, to continue to fund those operations. And you can see the summary there. 10% in the water fund, and then 7% in most of the rest of the funds. Power is just a little bit lower at 4% and only applying to residential customers. The takeaway here, I think, to be aware of is that those rate increases equate to approximately $10.50 per month for the average homeowner in Springville. And despite the increase, I think we're going to see increases in all of our neighboring utilities, and we continue to be among the lowest in the county there, as was demonstrated, I think, in our retreat. Other big story would be the amount of dollars we're spending on capital projects. We've gone through these in our retreat as well. $5.5 million in water, 2.7 in sewer, over $8 million in power, and then smaller amounts in stormwater, solid waste, and golf. We mentioned this before, but I'll just reiterate here that most of the budgets here on the enterprise fund side are utilizing reserves in order to balance, but that's been largely scheduled and anticipated as capital projects are addressed, and we've saved money to do those over time. Liz, for your benefit, this is where the 5% was in. I thought I had that in there somewhere. And importantly, we target 30% of operating revenues as reserve amounts in each of those funds, and despite using some reserves to fund this year's budget, all still are remaining intact with that minimum 30% reserve. So there's some security there, I think, in the enterprise funds. And then we explained a little bit about the golf course project. It's actually in this year's budget, but we've made a decision that the council appears to support, which is to place $1 million of what is really about a $3.5 million project at the golf course for the irrigation project. The golf course will repay that over time, and the balance is being paid with a one-time transfer of reserves from the general fund. So this budget sort of solidifies the mechanism there. Last slide is just to highlight a couple of changes that occurred since we had our last budget retreat. Again, we've reflected the changes in the Parks and Recreation Department structure, added one full-time dispatch position. We did program the roughly $630,000 in one-time projects that the council discussed last time, so those dollars have now been put in here. And we've reflected the ARPA funding that we're going to receive and how that money's going to be transferred around. And then there was one data entry error that I found related to debt service in the sewer fund that's been corrected, so we'll be able to pay our bond payment. That's the extent of my presentation. I'm happy to address any questions you've got. Otherwise, we'll look for a resolution to set the public hearing for next month.
Questions?
Can you just take 1 minute and explain, if people are watching on our, I'm sure some are, how much of an increase we've had in our public safety as far as ambulance and fire? 'Cause it wasn't like we weren't funded like we are right now previously, and maybe it wasn't a previous year, but I didn't know about it until coming on in January, how well-staffed, comparatively speaking, over the last year we are. And I don't, we haven't mentioned anything in that, did that all take place last year's budget?
I should have mentioned that or put a slide in there. I think what you're probably referring to is the conversion to full-time
Yes.
coverage.
I think people should know what we've done there.
Yeah, I think the takeaway there is it's actually not reflected in the budget right now. We've applied for a grant. We haven't heard the results of that yet. When and if we receive the grant, and we're hopeful that we will, we'll come back and amend the budget with its proper structure. But currently, that expanded coverage is not proposed or included in this tentative budget.
Hey, Bruce, let's give clarity, because I think the full-time coverage you're talking about is expanding to, is expanding to 6 firefighters at the station 24 hours a day. Back in late fall, we switched our coverage. We currently have 5 firefighters from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. and 3 firefighters from 7 p.m. to 7 a.m. So it actually works that we have 3 full-time firefighters on 24 hours a day,
That is
2
relatively
part-time.
That's new.
That's new. That's last fall. Right.
It was done as an amendment to the fiscal 22 budget in the fall. So that portion was amended in the current year and is carried forward and covered into next year. In addition to that, if we get the grant, we'll expand further.
But that is a big deal. I mean, the quality of response has really gone up, hasn't it, Chief? I mean, it's a big deal.
Yeah, particularly at night. So our response times at night have gone from 12 to 13 minutes because we did not have people here at night. We had people on call, but not here. That's now around 6 minutes. That's right.
Yeah, I just think that's one of the highlights of our personnel part of the budget.
That's a good point.
Plus, it provided consistent delivery of service. So, okay, other questions for Bruce? Okay, I'll entertain a motion then for acceptance or setting the public hearing for the budget.
I'll make a motion to approve resolution number 2022-18, adopting the City of Springville tentative budget for fiscal year 2022 to 2023, and set a public hearing for adoption of the final budget on June 21st, 2022 at 7 p.m.
Second?
Second.
Okay, it's a roll call vote. Chris?
Yes.
Jason?
Yes.
Mike?
Yes.
Craig?
Yes.
Liz?
Yes.
Wonderful. Okay, we need to do a closed session for legal and property.
That's correct, Mayor.
So I need a motion to adjourn this meeting and to enter into a closed session.
I'll motion to adjourn this meeting and enter into a closed session for
Litigation of
lit-
property.
litigation of property.
Well, I think we want to adjourn this meeting after the closed session,
Okay.
technically.
Do you
I'll
want to
adjourn
add
it.
that to your motion?
Can I add that to my motion? I'm sorry, I'm not good at motions.
No, I
I'll add
didn't mean
that.
to correct you. I just,
You know what she meant.
yeah, I knew what she meant. I just,
No, I know, but
Well, I
help
know
me
so much,
say
I'm gonna
it. I can
second
say it right. I need to say
Well,
it right. So
yeah,
thanks for the help. Yes.
I second it. Let's go.
Okay, those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Those,
Oh,
roll call vote. Okay, Liz?
Yes.
Craig?
Yes.
Jason?
Yes.
Mike?
Yes.
Chris?
Yes.
Thank you.